Welcome to Only for Your Ears and today's episode. But before we begin, I'd like to give a big thanks to people that have liked, shared, and subscribed. This is very much appreciated. And now for episode 50, What Old Johanne Told by Hans Christian Andersen, which I've renamed as The Blossoms of Time, Knowledge, and Wisdom. We'll start off with our usual summary, where I'll digress on a few highlighted sentences and give a reflection. Then we'll move on to my critical review on how this fairy tale plays in today's society using parallels from the fairy tale and situations now. Then we'll move on to a recent film or not so recent film to give a more parallel and teachings. Then we'll move on to the trigger points. There are positive and negative trigger points. And then we'll finish with a close with a quote. So let's begin. What Old Johanne Told, or The Blossoms of Time, Knowledge and Wisdom, is a lesser-known fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. The story revolves around Old Johanne, an elderly woman who lives alone in a small cottage. She is kind and a wise storyteller, known for sharing her stories with children and adults alike in her community. I digress. Johanne sounds like the community grandmother that gives sage advice and soothes withered brows when things get difficult and hands you a cup of her spicy remedies, nice and sweet, to cheer you up. The reflection, community and interconnectedness. The story emphasizes the importance of community and the role each individual play in supporting one another. Old Johann's stories and advice bring the villagers together, fostering a sense of unity and understanding. One day, a young boy named Peter visits Old Johanne, and she tells him a story about a beautiful flower that grows in the king's garden. I digress, where the best of nature is on display. This flower is said to grant wishes when picked, but only if the person picking it has a pure and unselfish heart. I digress. The wish may last for years, but once the flower is picked, it dies so quickly. Peter listens to the story intently and is curious about the flower. I digress. He's wondering if he could do such a thing and sustain the metaphorical beauty of his pure spirit and still get his wish. He decides to visit the king's garden and see for himself. I digress. The temptation is too great. Reflection, the power of storytelling. The story demonstrates the importance of storytelling in preserving cultural heritage and passing on knowledge, wisdom, and values from one generation to the next. Old Johanne stories are a means to educate and guide the villagers, offering them moral lessons and practical advice. When Peter arrives at the garden, he finds the beautiful flower and picks it. I digress. Interesting how there's no hesitation. Maybe Peter is more astute than the teacher thought. But instead of using it to make a wish, he decides to give it to Old Johanne as a gift. I digress. It's clever how this boy is quick to use the narrative's comprehension to show the woman what he's learned. Upon receiving the flower, Old Johanne is deeply touched by Peter's selflessness and kindness. I digress. I believe Peter and Johanne both understood that this was a test of their friendship. She tells Peter he has learned the most valuable lesson. I digress. And the old woman wisely taught him how to learn this lesson through piquing his curiosity with a flower, a wish, and serenity and strength of human nature. The true power of the flower lies in the unselfish love and kindness one has for others. I digress. So this memory of this beautiful and unselfish gesture will stay etched in their hearts. Reflection, the value of empathy and compassion. Through her stories, Johanne helps the villagers empathize with the experiences of others, teaching them the importance of compassion and understanding. The story encourages readers to be more empathetic and caring towards others, recognizing the struggles and the emotions of those around them. The story ends with Old Johanne and Peter enjoying each other's company, their bond strengthened by the shared experience and the moral lesson they both learned from the magical flower. I digress. Yes, indeed. Reflection. The beauty in simplicity. Andersen often portrayed the lives of ordinary people and the beauty of the simple everyday experience that make up human existence. What Old Johanne Told is another example of this theme, showcasing the value of simple acts of kindness, wisdom, and human connection. How this fairy tale plays in today's society. This is a wonderful fairy tale about knowledge, purity of heart, shared learning, and wisdom. I believe little Peter outsmarted Johanne. I don't think she anticipated Peter to be such a quick learner, and the wish that she spoke forth for, one taking a flower from the king's garden, would turn out to be such a precious lesson to be heeded with pure, sincere heart. Was interesting because her heart was tested for its sincerity. Much to her surprise, the boy gave her the responsibility of demonstrating what she had expressed to him, which meant she had to walk her walk and talk her talk and lead by example. This resulted in a lifelong friendship. I'm reminded of my own walk the walk and talk the talk experience when I encouraged my students to invest in themselves in English, and they were reluctant to do so at first. And it wasn't until I witnessed my own personal investment of self-love and began to thrive as a person did it show the proof of the pudding. Once they saw my transformation, people were persuaded of the possibility of bearing witness to their own fruit. Now we're going to look at the Titanic, which I think is an interesting film because there are loads of teachings and valuable droplets of wisdom that can be learned from this awful disaster. After winning a trip on the RMS Titanic during a dockside card game, American Jack Dawson spots the society girl Rose DeWitt Bucata, who is on her way to Philadelphia to marry her rich snobbed fiancé, Calden Hockley. Rose feels helplessly trapped by her situation and makes her way to the aft deck and thinks of suicide until she's rescued by Jack. First rescue in the movie. Cal is therefore obliged to invite Jack to dine on their first-class table, where he suffers through the slights of his snobbish host. In return, he spirits Rose off to a third class for an evening of dancing, giving her the time of her life, deciding to forsake her intended future altogether. Rose asks Jack, who has made his living making sketches on the streets of Paris, to draw her in the nude wearing the invaluable blue diamond. Cal has given her. Talk about provocative. Cal finds out and has Jack locked away. Soon afterwards, the ship hits an iceberg and Rose must find Jack while both must run from Cal, even as the ship sinks deeper into freezing water. Okay, so that's the second rescue that's taken place. They rescue each other. The truth behind the disaster of the Titanic has a couple of twists and turns. However, it's all related to maintaining the owners of the ocean liner saving face by the first captain in command. They knew they were wrong. In all the decisions that they made, they knew that they were wrong. That's the first thing. There was a problem with the captain panicking as he made a mistake steering the ship around the left side of the iceberg, but he swerved to the right, and there wasn't enough time to create an avoidance. Next, there was a competitive steamship owner who goaded the captain into upping the speed from 23 knots. Knots are just basically the different levels of speed, to 27 knots. Therefore, the ship was going so fast, the captain didn't, number one, see the iceberg, and it was going too fast to maintain the speed on such rocky waters. And of course, they couldn't avoid the collision because what they saw was too late. And as we know, it takes a huge amount of space to steer a ship out of harm's way. Also, the tip of the iceberg, small as it was, opposed to the massive mountain below, a huge mountain below. This competition should never have been played out. It cost lives. So there was a competition. The boat was going way too fast. It couldn't see the iceberg, and when it did, it was only the tip. And you know, icebergs, when you see the tip, there's a huge mountain below. The captain was the second in command, said of the ship, had stopped sailing and just stood still, nobody would have died, and they would have all been rescued. I dare to disagree. I think there would have been much less damage, because if the boat had stopped, the mountain wouldn't have just ripped the whole side of the boat off, and it wouldn't have drowned so quickly. It wouldn't have sunk so quickly. The class system did nothing to help the poor people on the bottom deck, and the savage loss of life amongst the poor was disgraceful. And of course, the wealthy got to be rescued amongst some middle-class folk, including Rose, who was upper class. She got to be rescued at the very end by Jack. He used his body as a float so she could hang on to him and survive, and he died. The romantic story shows that love still prevails in spite of the class system. The poor artist sacrificed his life for the wealthy princess. He rescued her, she rescued him, he rescued her again. Beautiful story, lots to be learned from the Titanic. Now let's take a look at my trigger points. What triggered me in a good way was Peter, the young boy's keen ear in listening to Johanne's story filled with teachings and wisdom. He understood it so well that he outsmarted the old lady. There are times as a teacher when I can say I underestimated how quickly young learners can absorb information. Well, plucked that flower and encouraged to be the leader she is. And it was wonderful to hear the story and to know that she led by example. Okay, so the next one is my personal story. The next trigger, my personal story of put your money where your mouth is and mean what you say. When I was gently pushed into how I encouraged myself, how I filled my cup. You know, for most of my life, I've been used to no, and I've been used to being rejected all the time. But because I'm such an empath and a compassionate, people always came to me for support, encouragement. I would say encouragement. And encouragement is just basically psychological and emotional support that gives people the impetus to be able to say, I think I can survive this. I think I can move forward. I think I can live another day. Sometimes people, it's that dramatic. Well, when I was going through a particularly harsh experience in my life, especially medically, I was going through a lot of different difficulties. I found myself really sort of wishing and hoping that I could find someone, this hermit that existed, could find someone to at least encourage them. But it wasn't like that. I was really down. I was really, really down about that because I just said, what do my dogs meet? I'm not worth anything. Nobody wants to help or encourage or support me in any way, but they want me to do it for them. And what Spirit showed me, he said, Melody, you've been looking around all your life, thinking that everybody else had the power that resides in you. Most people don't know how to encourage you, Melody, but you have all the tools inside and the resources to do this. And so I must admit, I reluctantly started to encourage myself. And it made me want to live another day. It made me push forward, and it made me survive. And in the end, I ended up rescuing myself, very much like what happened in the story in the Titanic, even though it wasn't a true story with the romance wasn't a true story. But I ended up rescuing myself in ways that were similar to the couple, Rose and Jack. Even though nobody rescued me, I rescued me. Well, in actual fact, I like to say my inner child rescued me. So that's my trigger. That's my personal experience that I'd like to add to today's episode. And we're going to close with a quote. And it's healing is a lifelong blessing, gift, and lesson we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong lesson, blessing, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Until next time, goodbye.